We are here yet again with Nick Robinson, the writer and director of Ocean Odyssey, which is the second film from, is it K2 Films?
Yeah, K2 Studios.
K2
Yeah, so
Studios. Okay, second
yeah.
K2 Studios film that we've got here at the Tennessee Aquarium IMAX 3D Theater, the other being Australia's Great Wild North. So we're excited to have Nick back. Thank you for making the time to come and digitally meet with us to talk about this film that we're going to be premiering here at the IMAX 3D Theater on March 4th. So I guess to begin with, let's start at, appropriately enough, the beginning. Talk me through the origins for this project, for a film on oceanic currents and the ocean's role in life on land and in the water.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I was a marine biologist in my previous life, so that's what I studied at university. And when I came out of uni, I wanted to make underwater films and made a few of them. But then over the years, got tied up in all sorts of documentaries, and this was my chance to kind of get back to the story of the ocean. And it just seemed like the right time for it. You know, a lot of people talk about the importance of the ocean and how we must protect it and all these kind of things, and it being a life support system. But I didn't think a lot of people understood the actual mechanisms of that life support system and why the animals of the sea were so important, and the ocean itself, the role it had to play in our lives. So this film was really about trying to tell the story of how the ocean makes life possible on the planet, and how a healthy ocean allows the whole earth to survive, I suppose. And the ocean currents story was a really big part of it. But it's also the animals, the carbon sinks, the rainfall, and the various sort of other roles that the ocean plays in our lives. So this was really a 101 of ocean ecology and how it works. And having Sylvia Earle as an ambassador, the sort of world's greatest ocean protector, on board just made the whole thing make sense.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how she became part of this project? I mean, was the idea from the beginning that you would leverage Dr. Earle, who, if people who are watching this maybe are not familiar, she was a chief scientist at NOAA, a National Geographic explorer at large, previously explorer in residence, who has decades and decades of experience as an advocate for the ocean and oceanic research. So she is basically the perfect person to talk about these kinds of things that you cover in Ocean Odyssey. But was she sort of on your mind from the beginning of this project?
Look, I mean, I had the idea of telling this story, the Ocean Odyssey story, which was that an ocean current journey to reveal the secrets of the sea. While I had the idea, I mean, every marine biologist wants to meet Sylvia Earle one day, and I'd studied that a long time ago, and she's such an amazing human being and an incredible ocean advocate. So yeah, my dream was always to have her in the film. The hardest part was trying to find time in her schedule, because she's a busy woman and incredibly productive. And when she accepted to be in the film, it was a huge celebration in the office, I have to say. Yeah.
It seems like what you were trying to achieve is very sort of in harmony and resonates well with her mission to sort of establish these hope spots around the planet. And one of them, I'm assuming, I haven't looked at the map, I'm assuming that the Great Barrier Reef must be one of those. We have one here in America that you can actually see a replica of at the aquarium in our Secret Reef exhibit, which focuses on the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. What you do in this film, she seems like the perfect partner in this project. I can imagine the celebration must have been pretty loud.
Yeah, she's a very powerful speaker and offers a huge amount of hope. And she's also happens to be the most qualified person on the subject. So what a wonderful person to have to talk about the importance of the ocean and the creatures that live there, and how they affect our everyday lives. So yeah, getting Sylvia was a huge bonus, and obviously I think anyone who loves the ocean, and I'm included in that, would know Sylvia Earle and wants to hear her speak. So she really took this film to another level.
When you talk about the interconnectivity of the ocean with life on all strata of life, so down in the film you cover everything from the I'm gonna get the name wrong, the phytoplankton.
Yeah.
Phytoplankton, all the way up to the macro animals, so the humpback whales that we mentioned earlier. sea lions, great white sharks, sea turtles. You covered the whole spectrum. That is a huge, huge bite to try and take as a filmmaker. How do you approach a topic as big as this, and make it something that's A, understandable, B, digestible in a 45-minute runtime, and C, doesn't maybe overwhelm people? I mean, how do you do that without losing focus?
Yeah, look, it's a real challenge, and it took me a long time to try and come up with the way to do that. But essentially, the 101 of the sea was what we set out to do, which was explain to people how the ocean makes life possible. So there's only a few components to that story, and they range from the microscopic creatures like the phytoplankton and other zooplankton that live in the ocean, right up to humpback whales. So there's a beautiful story there in terms of how the creatures of the sea make life possible, whether it be by regulating our climate through the carbon sinks that they generate, the carbon they capture from the air, or through the rainfall they create, because it's actually the phytoplankton that give off a gas that increases rainfall on land. So if you have a healthy ocean and you have all these creatures thriving, you actually get more rain on land. Our farms and our water catchments are replenished by these animals. So telling those stories, it was about breaking it down to the most important ones of those stories, I guess, and simplifying it as much as possible so that people could engage with it at the same time as being on a wonderful journey. So we chose a baby humpback whale and its mother that go on a journey from the Great Barrier Reef to Antarctica every year. That happens off the coast from where I am now, just off the east coast of Australia. And we chose that journey and the journey of that whale to help the audience connect with a character of the ocean, and then along the way discover the many roles of the ocean through various little side stories, I suppose you'd call them. And 3D underwater with this amazing Great Barrier Reef and the east coast here it was kind of the perfect place to tell that story in 45 minutes. But obviously it's a much bigger story. You could spend years on it. And many scientists do.
Well, like Dr. Earle. I mean, she's
like Dr. Earle, 50 years or more.
So when you're talking about any IMAX project, I mean, the size of the equipment immediately goes up, and the complexity of the production seems, I mean, looking from the outside in, I obviously have never shot with an IMAX camera, but I do know that they're larger. They tend to be heavier and a little bit more bulky. It seems like logistically things are automatically more complicated, but then you throw in you're shooting from boats and you're shooting underwater. I'm curious, when you take an IMAX camera underwater, as much as maybe doing that might raise your blood pressure a little bit just in terms of the safety of the equipment, does it make things easier in terms of the maneuverability and the options you have for maneuvering these large bulky cameras in the relative weightlessness of water as opposed to doing it on land?
Yes, I mean, getting it in and out of the water is always a challenge, and when we have sort of weather restrictions which cause problems, as soon as there's waves, it's really hard to lift a 60-kilo camera off the side of a boat into the water. So that's one of the challenges, but it's the 3D aspect of it that makes it challenging now, because the cameras have got smaller, I suppose, but as soon as you start talking 3D shooting underwater, it becomes a much larger and heavier rig, and a very expensive rig that is quite stressful. You don't want to flood that camera. But look, it is definitely more challenging to shoot IMAX, and also the 3D aspect of it means that we need good water quality and various sort of environmental things that are out of our control. But for this film, we spent a year looking at the weather, and whenever it looked right on one part, the east coast of Australia is 2,500 kilometers long, so we could pick the weather windows and just head there for that moment to shoot the various parts of the story over a year, when the weather and condition and animals and when everything fell into place for each location. And that's how we got the mix of it right, I suppose. If you had to go and you had a schedule and you just went in, I've got 6 weeks to shoot this film, you'd never be able to shoot this film. It really relied on so many things coming together and then just being able to hit the button and going, now's the time.
You mentioned Oceanic Currents. Here in the States, the one that we're probably most familiar with, at least on the East Coast, would be the Gulf Stream. So the one that flows all the way from the Caribbean up and I guess over across the North Atlantic to England, which is why England is able to not be completely frozen all the time. But do you feel like the East Australia Current had a little bit of a leg up just because of the association with Finding Nemo? I mean, there are some shots in the film in Ocean Odyssey that mirror very much what you see in Pixar in real life, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, I think that was part of the genesis of the whole theme was, yeah, in Finding Nemo, Marlin goes on a journey to find Nemo, who's been taken to an aquarium in Sydney, and he rides the East Australian Current, or the EAC as it's known. And and so that was a great vehicle, and an ocean current that was made famous, I guess, by a great film. And that was why we chose it, because people had already heard of it, and this was kind of a way to go on a journey on a real ocean, on the real EAC, if you like. Pixar took a bit of poetic license, but it wasn't too far from the truth. So we basically take you on the same journey down that ocean current, down the EAC, and along the way reveal these roles of the various animals and plants of the ocean, and how the ocean affects our lives. So it was a great vehicle, really. Like, and what a fantastic film to follow in the footsteps of. It's big shoes.
I think one of the cool things about this film is that for people who maybe are familiar with the EAC only through Finding Nemo, it's very, very cool to be able to see the in real life versions of these same characters that maybe you've only seen through Pixar magic. So you see the sea turtles, you see the sharks that are fortunately treating the whales as friends, not food, at least on camera. And the clownfish. The clownfish sequence is one that I really was not expecting. And I know that, I mean, obviously that was a nod, or it seems like a nod to Nemo and Marlin. That's a really interesting story that I don't think I would have from the outset thought of as being associated with the current. So the current really does seem to touch on, or oceanic currents really do seem to touch on quite a few different kinds of aquatic life.
Yeah, look, ocean currents are the superhighways of the sea for animals. That is, they completely transform the lives of all the animals, but they're also the number one climate driver on the planet we live on. So the northern latitudes and southern latitudes would be mostly frozen if it wasn't for ocean currents. They take that hot water from the equator and move it around in very elaborate patterns that we explain in the film. And the EAC helps you understand the huge role that ocean currents play, and the huge role they play in just maintaining the climate, but also in the lives of these creatures when they, like the young Nemos and of this world, their juveniles will often ride on the current. Most of these young fish will ride on the currents. The whales use these ocean currents to head south, and then they come back a different route to avoid the current. So, when the babies are born, they get this free ride most of the way back to Antarctica, thanks to an ocean current. So certainly I think the animals are well aware of ocean currents, just as we would be of highways and other, travel routes that we take in our lives. The fish and creatures of the sea are masters at using ocean currents.
So I asked you this last time. As a filmmaker, there's got to be moments that are sort of like gold star moments for what you managed to capture on film. So what would you consider to be like the wow moments, especially ones that translate especially effectively to being presented on IMAX?
Oh, look, I mean, I think in this film, I'd have to say that the interview with Sylvia Earle was the most fascinating interview I've ever done. She was incredible and so insightful and so passionate about her topic. So that would be my highlight in terms of just the story itself. But so filming humpback whales in 3D underwater and seeing that on a huge screen come to life is, I have to say, it's almost better in the theater than in the water. When you're watching that, it's an incredible immersion into that world, and even the clownfish getting into their tiny world, but seeing that world so big and the detail and being able to sort of read the complexity of that marine environment when you're immersed in it on these giant screens, and when it's been shot well and the 3D's popping. I mean, for me, it's an incredible immersion. I can sit in the theater and watch that all day. It's a beautiful thing. You see a lot more than we saw when we shot it. That's for sure. You see every detail we didn't see.
You definitely chose well, I think, for that opening shot. The film begins. Ocean Odyssey begins with the mother and her calf underwater, and the 3D effect It really is pretty remarkable. And getting a chance to see that particular shot is a real wow moment. It is a pretty spectacular way to start the film.
It's like being there, right? Like it's like being there when you it's like being in the water with a mother and calf whale and having them swim past you with that in that sort of detail. So it's quite moving. I find these 3D IMAX films that they're an incredible films to make, because we make them and we don't see the final thing until we get to sit in a theater like yours and finally watch it on the giant screen, and the detail and the experience is so overwhelming in terms of showing off these pictures that we saw in the camera, but they're so special when you get them on the big screen. Yeah.
So you mentioned that Ocean Odyssey is, it's a world ocean. It's a story that really is a world story. So what has it been like as a filmmaker to see the film make the rounds worldwide? I mean, this is a story that it's an environment and a habitat that touches on all of us, and it's going to take, as Dr. Earle points out in the film, a real collaborative effort for us to protect. And films like this probably do no small amount of work in terms of raising awareness of these issues and encouraging that kind of participation. So how has it felt to see your film and its message being shown around the world and potentially hitting people and encouraging some of that participation in the effort to safeguard the ocean for future generations?
Yeah, look, I mean, we make these films for that reason. That's why we invest so much time and energy into trying to tell these stories. This film is going out into theaters and touching several million people in a way, especially in 3D. It's for younger people, it's such an overwhelming experience that it's hard to sort of ignore the message when you see it in that much beauty and with Sylvia Earle's words. So for me, it's a huge win to see it on the screens. It's a small part in a much bigger effort that's a global effort that many, many people are making to help the world's oceans and our planet as a whole. And so it's a real, I guess it's a real privilege to be part of that movement.
Yeah, it's got to make the marine biologist in you feel no small sense of pride, I guess, in helping to tackle this problem that affects so many of us on such a large scale.
For sure. Look, I probably wouldn't have been a very good scientist. I'm not detail focused enough, but to be able to produce a film like this that hopefully goes some way to educating people as to these important stories, and they're actually quite simple stories, which is the great thing about them. You don't have to be a scientist to understand these concepts. So it's a fantastic sort of proxy to doing a bit of science, actually doing something good for the planet through a film like that.
Well, Nick Robinson, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us yet again. Hopefully we'll be showing more K2 Studios films here at the Tennessee Aquarium IMAX 3D Theater in the future, and I'll get a chance to Zoom with you again. But in the meantime, thank you for taking the time to walk us through some of the background of Ocean Odyssey, this amazing film that, again, is premiering here at the IMAX 3D Theater on March 4th. I really appreciate your time, your insights, and your work. It's been really interesting to watch these films on such a large scale in a theater like ours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having the film on. I really hope the audience loves it.
These humpback whales are on a 2,000-mile migration from the Great Barrier Reef to the feeding grounds of Antarctica. They'll follow the powerful flow of an undersea highway called the East Australian Current, part of a global network of ocean currents crucial to life in the sea and on land.
If the ocean is the blue heart of the planet, then the currents are like the veins and the arteries that just flow around the world.
Join our intrepid pod on an epic underwater journey as they encounter the wonders of the Southern Sea and the people leading the effort to understand and protect the currents of our planet's blue heart.
just beginning to understand how complex it is and how the ocean makes possible all of the rest of life on Earth.